this is, you know, kind of depressing, but I wanted to start out with this, which is that, that essentially, you know, this is data from the Office of Extramural Research, that the average age when people get their R01s has been increasing steadily since 1980. So at that time, if you looked at like MDs, for example, maybe around 38, and then now the first R01 would be like 44. So that's really okay because lifespans are also extending with better health care. So that's okay. We can just work longer and harder. So but that is sort of disturbing and a trend because of all the training and because it has become more difficult to make that transition from K to R. And this is another way to show it, but the number of NIH research awards made to PIs 35 years of age and younger is like really getting almost vanishingly small. So it's really then okay that you should just feel really good because you're within the trend as you get older, that's your first R01. But it used I mean, we all look back at like those papers that people wrote in 1979 where like there's one finding and there's one like table and they didn't have to do much. So those were just good times. That's all I can say. It's 1979 because thousands of people. And then I thought this was very amusing because this helps no one, but this is data from a recent PLOS One article on the aging of biomedical research in the United States. And what they're trying to point out here is that not only is the R01 age, which is the red line, getting older, but the average time for your first award, the K, is getting older. But then they're trying to point out by these dots that people who won Nobel Prizes, it's not changing, like you're still like 30 when you make your breakthrough discovery. So I guess there's still a chance when we're really young that apparently isn't changing. People make breakthrough discoveries early that lead to Nobel Prizes. And then this is helping your moral even more because then the applications are going up to the NIH. And it's not just the number of applications, but it's the number of repeat applications by successful investigators. So, so that is all to say that yeah, it's a tougher funding environment, but this is the group that's going to get it. So the good side of this is that NIH is absolutely, as Alan said, encouraging early investigators, and there hasn't actually been a change, even though things were sequestered and so tight, on the success rate of early stage investigators getting an R01 in 2011 and 2012, and we knew all that was happening in 2012. So 18% success rate overall for new investigators. That's not true of the overall success rate of R01. So you have that advantage, the pay line, the cutoff, right? The cutoff that would be considered a fundable grant for an older investigator or for not an early stage investigator is lower than the pay line for an early stage investigator. So keeping your early stage investigator status intact if you're going from your K to R is important. And so what qualifies for being an early stage investigator? It was initiated in 2009, so it hasn't been around that long. And you qualify if you're within 10 years of completing your terminal degree or residency. So for MDs, it would be residency. Fellowship actually doesn't count because fellowship most often has research years. But the lucky thing is you can extend your early investigator status even if you're 10 years out of your residency, for example, in the MD field. And things that extend it are family care responsibilities, or I did 2 residencies, or I had to get this additional didactic instruction, loan repayment, Hurricane Sandy apparently. So the usual extension that you can get is 24 months, or that's the average. There have been people who will say, I left medicine altogether, I'm coming back, and can go up to 120 months. And as of July 15th, the NIAID pay line for R01s is 8%, but for early stage investigators, it's 12%. So, so that is a major advantage. And this reference below tells you about the new investigator policies. So most of you qualify. So again, these are not, some of these tips are from the NIH and some of these are just, we all know this, no matter what, our unit of currency is not changing. Your unit of currency is publications. It's like extracurricular activities when you're in high school to get into a good college versus like getting good grades, right? And so no matter how much extracurricular activities you have, what's your unit of currency? And it's publications. So Solgi's question was great about what you did in your PhD, because if you've proven that you can take a project through from the start to the finish and you have multiple publications, even if it's from a different field, you're saying that you have that capability and that you're able to work within the currency, which is not changing. So there's no new currency in the works. Abstracts are not currency. Putting in grant applications, whether you get them or not, is not currency. It's publications. And so as you're approaching the R, that's where it's changing, where it's just quantity and it's changing into a niche, where it's changing into a theme developing in your biosketch, where the first 5 publications, right, in your biosketch are what's most relevant to the research that you're proposing. And then you can have your 10 others that have nothing to do with it. But you're trying to develop a theme in your publication so that you're really poising yourself in your R01 that I really am the person to do this. And try not to have in those first 5 publications, and this is going to be a negotiation, but try not to have your primary mentor as the last author in every single one of those publications, because you're just trying to prove that, like, I'm not sticking with this person. You're trying to prove in the R01 that this is a path to independence. So that's really important, even if you have to ask them nicely, like, this last publication, I don't want you there. And actually, it's important that there's a few quality publications, because you're trying to prove that you're, like, kind of poising yourself as the expert in this, and it doesn't have to be quantity, it has to be that, like, this had an impact. This was in this journal, this had an impact, this has been referenced. And so it's really the higher impact journal, solid demonstration of an important finding, a really solid paper that means a lot, and you're referencing it, like, 10 times, or not, more than that, like 20 times throughout your grant, but that was an important article. And then this is true, and these are really good tips from NIAID that Alan showed from Pick Your Research Project, and he talked a lot about this, but the idea is that you would propose something that they could see then would be also consistent with your next R01. So really you're proposing something that there's a theme that's going to build for not the next 5 years, but the next 10 years, that there's continuity to this theme. And these are just straight from the NIAID that you should locate the most promising research needs and opportunity in your field. But for you guys transitioning from K to R, look at the other players and judge whether you can compete. And obviously you're networking with these players. So say that there's someone who's kind of in the same field, who's been starting to make an impact in this field. Instead of trying to poise yourself as a competitor, network with them, search the literature, find them. They're going to be the one who will be your reviewers, interact with them at a meeting, say that was such a great article last month, can you send that to me? This is of interest to me, could we collaborate? Follow up with an email, that was really great work, that's really incited me to think about this different approach, so that, like, you're friends with them, because those are the people that are going to be your reviewers, and reference them in your grant. So again, get them on your side, so their references, even if you don't like them, are like peppered throughout your grant. So that's really important, I think, because it sets it up so it's not a competition, but it sets it up like, hey, this person's going to be really friendly, let's let them enter my field. So this is, again, my just personal tips, or at least what worked for me, is that try to clear your deck. So I do this thing where you go through your calendar and there's like that meeting with that student, or that's that, provider meeting, or just something. Clear your decks for 3 months. Like, go into that mode. And this is just what, I'm not saying that everyone needs 3 months, but go into that mode if you can, like when you were studying for the MCATs, or where you're studying for the boards, where that's like kind of all you do. And of course you're doing everything else you're doing that you have to, but as much as possible, try to turtle. Be a turtle in those 3 months. These are my personal tips. Maybe other people work totally different. Contact your RSA early. Make them send you that timeline that they send you, where all the documents are due, and have that, like, pasted up so that you know that for the September deadline, that actually by this date in August is when some of the major documents are due, so that all those extra forms that you have to do in the project summary and all that stuff is like ready, so that that would never be missed. So cancel those standing meetings that you don't have to do, clear clinical obligations, you're not attending, like 2 weeks before your grant is due. Only keep what you have to keep up in the air. And then some people work holed up, and some people work in a cafe, and some people work in the library, and some people can't stand it when someone talks to them, and just whatever it is that your best work. Everyone is different in that way. So in my case, I had this research office. I worked in the same way. I literally wore this same pink sweatshirt every day that had a dolphin on it that I got from SeaWorld, and I ate the same lunch every day. That was just sort of this weird superstition that I had that I would get it if I did that. So, worked in this particular case. So the other thing that's a mistake, or at least that I've been given advice and worked in this particular case, was to not garner 10 opinions from people. Identify early on who's your key reviewers. And it would be important, of course, your mentor that you'd been working with the whole time, someone you really respect who has a great track record in getting grants, your career mentor. Identify like 4 key people that you think are really important, and don't elicit more than that, because then they're conflicting with each other, and there's like red marks, and there's comments all over. Like, make sure that it's people you respect, 3 to 4, and don't get too many. And pick a due date like a month and a half before to send them that first draft. So like that means that's where the 3 months comes in, but give them enough time to really make substantial contributions to the entire grant, not just your specific aims page. Of course, you're running the specific aims page by them first, and that's important. But you want to be able to give them the whole draft in enough time that it's almost a mock study section, so that you give them like a turnaround time of 10 days or something, and then you have a full 2 weeks more to work on it. And then as I said this before, you're identifying with your mentors, but you're identifying the study section that makes the most sense. Look at that roster of those study sections. Look at what they've done. Look at what they would possibly be interested in. Put their references in your grant. Be strategic. And then we all know this, the general format of an R01, remember, is the significance aims page, which is one page, and then the 12-page section, which is significance, innovation, and approach, and that's all 12 pages. Preliminary studies and research design and methods in your approach. And references are unlimited. So that's what Alan was saying, is why crowd all the text in to your background section if you can have unlimited references. There are many journal manuscripts where you don't have unlimited references to explain what you mean. So say it by saying 10 references, but don't put in every detail in your background. I mean, just assume that people have the ability to go look it up in references if they have to. And then I got a lot of good advice from Ruth Greenblatt, my primary mentor when I was writing this, because she had sat in study section, and the thing that really bothered her was what Alan was saying, was not having white space. So this idea of crowding everything in, where like someone just has to look at like such a black page. There has to be a lot of space between paragraphs. You're not squishing the, so it's single line, don't try to squish it to like 0.90 with the point. Like, just keep it white space, because again, like you don't have to keep on convincing them, because you get to use all your references. So, clear language, lots of white space. One grant, you can actually have a box on the side with your key point, and kind of a shaded box. Like when we were writing an adherence grant, C. Everett Koop once said, medications don't work in those who don't take them. And it was just this sort of like cute little box on the side. I mean, why not? Like that's a key point. So you can actually use some color, and so you can, like, for instance, box your specific aim. So that specific aims is so important, right? You have that like hitting why this is so incredibly important, and then you have your specific aims. It's so squishy and yuck if you just like put everything together. Put a box around it, color it slightly, like try to make it look so it's standing out, so that everything is looking clear. It's like fun to read. It's like something that like you literally is popping out at you. Don't bold too much, as Alan said. Don't start your grant application with HIV affects 34.2 million people worldwide. So these are HIV study sections. They know all that. They know adherence is important. They know, whatever is important. Like start with, this T-reg I think is going to completely cure HIV. Like don't start though with like basic facts about HIV and like having your introduction section 2 paragraphs are, it's really been bad pandemic. It's just been hard. We don't, like we don't need that. Okay, so heavily use your references, and then tell a story, as people have said. So this is an example in the specific aims page that you can put all your, like, this is why this is like the most important study in the world, and then box your specific aims. Like put them in a box, say in the top we hypothesize something, and then aim 1, aim 2, aim 2, 3, and aim 1, aim 2, and 3 are like highlighted. So you can do that, like you can actually do that like people look at often on the screen. So even color is okay, and no one, that's okay. And then in your introduction section, then, you know, because you don't want to like crowd it all with this text, then like really use key, of course, tables and figures that are easy to read. And again, you can use color. So really, instead of like summarizing something in so much text, figure out when you can use tables to like say a lot in tables. And as Alan said, don't squish it all and don't have tiny figures with tiny illegible things. And then I think that it's important to say that many people have gotten their R on the second round. And don't, like Alan said, don't feel discouraged, like you have to be persistent. So, but like in a, you know when you get like a manuscript back and it says it needs major revisions, that's like something that can be really excellent because it doesn't mean no. And the best chance of getting that manuscript in is to be very responsive, point by point to those revisions, really respectful. And so when you get, you know, you're gonna be reviewed by the same study section the next time around, and even though there can be changes, but if you're very responsive to all the reviewers' points, they will understand that you're trying to respond to the, now, as Alan said, if like, this is just not important, it's not important. It doesn't have high impact, it's not gonna change anyone's life, that's never gonna happen. But usually you didn't get a score that you can resubmit if that's true. So yeah, go ahead.
How do you know it's the same study section?
So not always, but you submit in your cover letter for your R01 a suggestion of where you think the best study section is. And usually when it's, and maybe Alan can address this, when it's resubmitted, unless it's an ad hoc study section, doesn't it go to the same study section? Yeah.
The only difference is if you, for some reason, go to a special interest
Yes.
it might go back to that same panel, but the reviewers, I mean, you can never guarantee the reviewers are going to be completely the same. In the case of a special emphasis panel, most likely not. In the case of a standing study section where you're more likely to apply, chances are you're going to have some of the same reviewers, but not all.
Can you ask for the same reviewers?
No, I mean, you can say, on your first one, you can make a suggestion. I think this belongs in ACE because this is more biomedical than behavioral. I think it belongs in, you know, you can say all that stuff, but they, you know, the person decides.
The comment I'd have back to that is if you have a real problem with one reviewer who just had some incredible bias against what you're posting, you can ask not to have reviewer 3. You can request that in your cover letter.
Does CSR make that decision? Or?
Yeah, CSR makes that decision. They may or may not abide by your request, but they will try to. If for some reason you can provide a really strong rationale for why that person should be your reviewer, they'll try not to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just coming off of a review panel where I reviewed someone's grant who was responsive to previous reviewers that were not me, you get the old reviews and you read them and you're looking to see how responsive they are to the old reviews, but unfortunately, you also have your own assessment, and therefore you're going to have critiques that maybe the other reviewers didn't have, and you know, it's just the way it is.
This most works when you weren't on a special emphasis panel and you also turned it around quickly. I mean, like, because also even the standing study sections change in their reviewers. So this would be, you know, you actually have up to something like 37 months to reapply with the same grant, you know, resubmit your grant. But sometimes people will advise the next one because you're trying to work with those same reviewers and say, look, I totally get it. I responded to this point by point. You have a cover letter or you have a document where you say, this is what the reviewer raised. This is how I addressed it. Great point. Thank you very much. Yeah, but you're right, it doesn't always work out that way. And then I would say that please call on us, because I think that is what's important, is that I also had people, when I chose those 3 to 4 people, I had 2 people that had nothing to do with the field because they were just really good at grantsmanship or could approach it with this eye. And so you have us in the CFAR mentoring program. For those of you in this R24 program, that's our responsibility, is to help you with grants as well. And then do not be shy. People are so nice about this, that ask mid-level investigators to share their R01. Like, people are very nice about sharing that, because the more examples of success, the better. Like, when you look at the NIH, there's like this one basic science grant that they keep on like sharing, and that's not helpful, like, for those of us. I mean, they don't actually have a lot of examples on the NIH site, so ask us. And then I actually really like Rock Talk. If you have not signed up for Rock Talk, this is someone from the Office of Sponsored Research named Sally Rocky, who writes these, you just sign up for her blog, and she writes these tips of like what's working, what's not working, why do we fund certain applications, grantsmanship ideas, and it's very helpful to get Rock Talk. And then of course, places like CAPS have a formalized structure for mock study sections, but we in the Weiss study, for example, form like mock study sections for anyone who's submitting a K. So that's literally where they're actually conferring with each other, as well as you just sending it independently to 4 people. You may want to ask your mentor to set up a mock study section for you. And that's it, if there are any questions. But that's what, I mean, this is, the one thing that matters is that you're from an institution that hopefully has a lot of support for you, so please call on those supports when you're writing these. I didn't throw away that sweatshirt, but it's really smelly.
Something that happens during a K, for example, is sometimes your research goes in different directions than you might have proposed in a K. Is there any kind of reflection of like your ability to, accomplish the research that you might have laid out in your specific games when people are evaluating like further for applications on the road, or is it really just productivity?
Productivity. So like at some level, it doesn't matter. Like, if you were the person that proved that you could take something from start to finish, then you're the person who ultimately is going to take this R to start to finish. So no matter what, like, that is, the longer that list and the higher the impact journals and the quality of that list, that will always make you get in. It's like, there was this thing in medical school where they had, when you're applying for medical school, that they had there's this grid, where your MCAT scores and your grades were placed on a grid. And no matter what, if you're in the top of that grid, then again, the extracurricular stuff didn't matter. Like, if you've proven yourself as someone who's an achiever, who takes things, it's just, that's the unit. I mean, unfortunately, like, that's just like, no matter what, it is. I mean, I think that's not going to change. I don't see that changing. I think that's really true.
Let's say you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z in your K, but you actually do A, B, and C, which is very different from what you do. You publish A, B, and C, but it's not necessarily.
Oh, I think that's completely fine. My K had nothing to do with what I did. I mean, in my particular case, like, I just gave the K credit, but none of my aims were fulfilled. I mean, is that okay? Sorry, but no one cared, it seemed. These are again specifics, and you could provide the generalization, so I was just talking about my own experience. But that is really true. I really didn't, really. It was like a totally different project. It's at least at UCSF, when you're up for promotion, Committee for Academic and Promote, whatever, CAP, looks at your publication list and starts to see if it's the same last author every time in terms of promotion. Certainly when you're in a laboratory where only that person can provide that mentorship, that would make more sense that the person is always in the last author. But no matter what, an R1 is independent, so there has to be something very distinguishing. And maybe all your publications to date were last author, but you're explaining why you're the one that's poised to take this to the next level.